The average first-time mother in Europe is now over 30. In the US, it's 27 and climbing. In South Korea, it's 33. These numbers keep going up, and the explanation everyone gives is money. They can't afford it. But I know people who can afford it. Good job, good relationship, good apartment, savings, everything in place, and they still say the same thing. Not yet. So if it's not money, what is it? Last two videos I've been pulling at a thread. The beauty industry taught us to evaluate ourselves constantly. Dating apps taught us to evaluate each other. And stability, choosing one thing and staying, became psychologically expensive. But at the end of the last video I asked a question. What happens when this culture meets something you can't swipe away from? So I started thinking about parenthood. And I want to be careful here, because this isn't a video about why people should have kids. Or shouldn't. What I'm interested in is a pattern I keep seeing. And the pattern isn't, I don't want children. Picture someone. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. They're 32. They've spent the last 10 years building something. Degree, maybe a master's. Career, a job where people know their name. An apartment they chose carefully. A routine that works. They go to the gym. They have a social life. They travel when they can. They're good at what they do, and they know it. This isn't vanity. This is 10 years of showing up, making decisions, getting better at something. 10 years of becoming a specific person. Someone efficient. Someone in control. Someone whose life makes sense when they describe it. And then someone says, have a child. Which, translated from life language, means give up sleep for 2 years. Lose control of your schedule completely. Watch your body change in ways you didn't choose. Become dependent on someone who can't even hold their own head up. Become worse at your job, at least temporarily. Become less available to your friends. Become less visible. Not permanently, but noticeably. And in a culture where your value is tied to performance, to visibility, to control, temporarily still costs something. And here's what I think is really happening underneath all of this. Parenthood asks you to do something very specific, something the last 10 years of your life trained you to avoid. It asks you to become incompetent. Not forever, but for a while. The first months of being a parent, you don't know what you're doing. The baby cries and you don't know why. You're exhausted and there's no performance review that tells you you're doing well. There's no metric, no feedback loop. No one swipes right on your parenting at 3 a.m. If your entire identity is built around being good at things, parenthood doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like someone demolished your house and said, here, build a new one, but this time, you don't get blueprints. And that's the real fear. Not the money, not the time, not even the responsibility. It's the gap between the person you were and the person you're becoming. During that gap, you're nobody. Not the professional anymore. Not fully a parent yet. Just in between. And in a culture that spent 10 years teaching you to optimize everything, to get the perfect routine, the perfect career, the perfect relationship, rewriting all of it at once feels like burning down what you built. That's not egoism. That's self-preservation. The mind protecting the version of you that it knows works. Which, if you think about it, is actually rational. The problem is that rationality and parenthood don't live on the same street. And I got curious about what this actually looks like. Not in theory, in practice. What happens to someone in those first months? I read a thread a while ago, I think it was Reddit, might have been somewhere else, where new parents described their first 3 months. And what struck me wasn't the tiredness. Everyone knows about the tiredness. What struck me was how many of them use the word lost. Not lost as in confused. Lost as in, I don't recognize myself. One guy wrote something like, I used to be the person my friends came to for advice. Now I can't figure out how to fold a stroller. A woman wrote, I love my daughter, and also, I haven't felt like myself in 4 months. And here's the thing nobody tells you. That feeling, it's normal. It's supposed to happen. Because you are becoming someone else. That's not a side effect of parenthood. That's the actual process. But we live in a culture that treats identity change as a crisis, not as a transition, as a crisis. Because if your identity is your project, your brand, your optimization journey, your career arc, then any disruption to that project feels like damage, not growth, damage. A caterpillar doesn't enjoy becoming a butterfly. The process involves dissolving, literally. Most of your old structure has to break down before the new one can form, and I think that's actually what parenthood does to identity. It dissolves the old version before the new one is ready, and that middle period, that liquid phase where nothing is solid, that's what people are afraid of. They just don't say it that way. They say, "I'm not ready," which, translated, means, "I can't survive the dissolving part." And here's something that makes this even more complicated. The longer you wait, the harder the transformation gets. Not biologically. I mean, yes, biologically too. But I'm talking about something else. Identity. At 24, your identity is still forming. You're still figuring out who you are. Your routines aren't locked in. Your sense of self is flexible. Adding parent to that mix is disruptive, sure, but it's disrupting something that wasn't finished yet. It's like renovating a house while it's still under construction. Messy, but possible. At 34, your identity is built, furnished, decorated. You know exactly where everything goes. You've optimized your morning. You've curated your social circle. You've designed a life that makes sense. And now parenthood comes along and says, "I'm going to rearrange everything. Every room. Starting now." Same renovation, but at 24, you're rearranging boxes. At 34, you're demolishing walls. And this is the part that nobody connects to the later conversation. Every year you wait, the cost of the identity transformation goes up. Not because you're weaker, because you're more built, more consolidated, more yourself. And the more yourself you are, the more parenthood has to undo before it can rebuild. That's not an argument for having kids young. It's just a mechanism that I think is invisible to most people. The "not yet" feels free each year, but each year it quietly raises the price of the yes. And this plays out differently depending on where you live. In the beauty video, I talked about how in smaller communities, children add status. Your role as a parent is clear, respected. Nobody asks what you lost because you gained something visible. In large cities, it's inverted. Your value comes from what you produce, your visibility, your personal brand. And a child, at least temporarily, reduces all three. In a village, having a child is a promotion. In a city, it can feel like a demotion. Same event, completely different meaning. But there's something deeper here about why these structures reward different things. And I want to get into that properly, because I think the difference between your grandparents' world and yours isn't just economic, it's architectural. The whole system works differently. That's what the next video is about. But before that, there's something else I've been thinking about. Because you can want a child conceptually, you can picture it, the first steps, the birthday parties, teaching them to ride a bike. That's imagination. And imagination is easy. Your brain is very good at running pleasant scenarios. But integration is different. Integration means, I will become a different person. Not in theory, in practice. Every day, for years. And the person I become will be less controlled, less efficient, less independent, less optimized than the person I am now. Someone said something to me once that I haven't been able to shake. I want kids the way I want to run a marathon. In theory, it sounds meaningful, but every morning I choose sleep. I don't know if that's funny or devastating. Maybe both. The point is, the gap between wanting and doing isn't laziness. It's the cost of transformation. And that cost goes up every year you spend building an identity that depends on the opposite of what parenthood requires. So here's where this all lands for me. The beauty video was about evaluating yourself. The dating video was about evaluating others. This one is about something closer, evaluating whether you can survive becoming someone new. And the pattern is the same. In a culture built on optimization, anything that requires you to temporarily become worse, less controlled, less visible, less competent, feels like a threat. Not a moral failure, not selfishness, a structural conflict between who you've become and who you'd need to become. Having a child isn't just adding someone to your life, it's rewriting who you are. And in a culture that spent a decade teaching you that who you are is your greatest project, rewriting yourself feels like loss before it feels like meaning. Maybe it becomes meaning later. I think for most people it does, but the fear comes first, and the fear is louder than the meaning. Because the fear is now, and the meaning is years away. And that might be the most honest thing I can say about why people wait. But there's a bigger question underneath all of this. Everything I've described, the evaluation, the comparison, the fear of losing yourself, none of it is random. It's a specific culture, a specific structure. Your grandparents didn't have this problem. Not because they were better people, because they lived in a different world. Different rules, different rewards, different architecture. What was that world? Why did it work differently? And what did we trade away when we left it? That's next.